All right, Dylan, we're live. We're recording. I'm going to pretend that I know what I'm doing, even though I've been doing this for a whole grand of 6 months. So, cheers. How are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing all right. I got some good sleep. It's good sleep. I'm here, very present. But yeah, you're. I just recently got introduced to you because of your the individual who's producing your next feature film, Rocky Top, which was originally a short film, I believe.
Hmm.
And she's like, "Hey, this is probably be an interesting person to talk to." And then I went through. I'm like, "Oh, there's a lot of stuff to go through here." Okay, I gotta like I actually had a menu to scroll through this time.
we
It's like
we try.
some
We
independent
try.
filmmakers they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I did this one thing for a 48-hour film festival," and it's like, okay, cool, but that's not like an hour's worth of conversation right there. But
Yeah,
you got a fair
yeah.
amount. Like last year, you put out like 7 short films, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, I gotta
Yeah.
go through. But I do want to talk about like the feature film that you're doing. Certainly want that to be the meat and the bulk of it, because a lot of filmmakers, especially indie filmmakers, they're still making short films and they're wanting to get to that feature length. And so we can talk about a little bit about the process of how you got to
Mhm.
where you're doing what you're doing. But just go ahead and like introduce yourself to start, and how you got started.
Yeah, so I'm Dylan Anglin. I'm a director, writer, director, I guess you could say, on a lot of my projects. Writer, director, editor, sound, cinematography, just doing a lot of
The
it,
one man
essentially.
band.
Yeah, yeah, basically, and that's not my choice, but no, I've been wanting to make films ever since I was little, ever since I saw the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre at like 4 years old. But I guess before when you're the thing is when you're younger, like I would say, like elementary school or whatever. The word director, I don't think it necessarily means what it means as you get older. I think whenever you're like a certain age, it's like, oh, it'd be so cool to make movies. Because whenever I was little, I was like, oh, I'd love to make movies, act in movies, do this in movies. But then as I got older, directing was the one thing that it kind of just narrowed itself down.
Mm.
Um, which I went to school. I'm a college dropout, but I went to school for architect and design. So architecture was what I thought I was interested in, but filmmaking was really that thing that kept pulling me. So, and that's
Mm.
the interesting conversation you get to have with your parents. Like, hey, I'm going to drop out of college and make movies. We'll see how it goes.
They're like, oh great, we're gonna have a starving artist.
Yeah,
That's what we're gonna have. You're gonna be a boomerang kid. You're gonna throw him
yeah.
back, and he's gonna be like, oh, but I got a movie now.
That's how it goes. That's how it goes. But you know what? You're the kid. They got to trust you. I mean, what can they do? Just disown you just like that? I've done plenty of other things to be disowned besides making movies, I'm sure. So,
Yeah, that's low on the list.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I saw that a lot of your work was from actually last year. You made 7 shorts. Have you always been writing and then just ended up trying to direct later on, or like what came first, writing or directing, or was it just at the same time?
Writing. It was writing. That was because writing is so easy. I mean, and I say that like it's easy, but I mean just the actual start of it is all you need is a pen and paper. All you need is a keyboard and a screen when it comes to writing. But when it actually comes to directing, most of the time, if you're a director, you're probably going to be buying your own equipment. You're going to be doing your own casting. You're going to be doing a lot of that stuff. So no, when I got out of high school and being extremely broke and all that stuff, I just wrote screenplays. And
Mm.
like some of the stuff that I wrote back then, like Pesadilla, which was my debut feature film, the one that I consider my debut feature film. uh, I wrote that when I was 23, around 23, and then I
Mm.
didn't film it until I was like 25. Um, so, and also all the short films that I did last year, I did do a big chunk of them, but it wasn't really anything that was like a rushed process. It was just after Pesadilla, I didn't want to film my next feature film like right off the bat because that's just not who I am as a filmmaker. I don't want to, rush things. So the best thing to kind of keep on your toes and kind of keep learning, is to make short films because there's not really much of a risk doing them.
Mm.
And I mean, they take less time to make. And also you can experiment, which is something that I really like to do as a filmmaker. Is I kind of like to, I don't want to sound pretentious and say push boundaries, but I mean that's what interests me is when I'm making a film. Is if I'm not problem solving in some type of way, I don't really enjoy the process that much. You know, like when I first started making films, it was just really cool to set up the camera, see a nice image, see what was in your head come to life. But then it's almost like a drug in a way, where you just want more as you're making films. And I'm at the level now where if I'm not problem solving, I'm not really having too much fun. Which maybe I'm just putting extra added pressure on myself.
Mm-hmm.
That might just be what it is. But no, we did the short films last year, and I'm actually doing a feature film right now, which, believe it or not, my first film, Pesadilla, we had $20,000 to make that, and my feature film I'm filming right now, Vignettes, we're filming it for, I kid you not, it's under $1,000. And the
Mm.
reason why we're able to do this is because all the short films that we did last year, it was kind of, we sat down as a team because we knew Rocky Top was going to be the big project that we wanted to do.
Okay.
And between Pesadilla and Rocky Top, there's just too much time in between there to stay stagnant, you know, especially someone like me that's trying to get my name out there. You know, I mean, some people can afford to take 5 years off a project and, you know, focus on pre-production with wardrobes and such like that. But for me, I got to keep working because I'm trying to get my name out there. And I was sitting down with my team and I was like, well, look, we did a really good job doing these short films last year. I mean, we filmed a bunch of them. We did it on the weekends. So what if we sort of took that and we made kind of an anthology film where I can work, you know, with you guys. You can come up with some stories, and I'll basically adapt your stories and write them. So vignettes, what we're filming now, it's an anthology format, but it's one overarching story with three smaller stories, you know, connecting it together. But we're also flipping the genre on its head a little bit and doing some interesting things with it.
Okay. Was there a lot of experimentation that you were kind of deliberately doing when you're doing those short films, that when keeping in mind that you were going to eventually try to do Rocky? So you're trying to make some mistakes and see what you can play around with to see, you know, is this something you actually end up wanting to do to kind of like, you know, problem solve before the problems arise?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's something that we're doing with vignettes because my philosophy is our budget's $1,000, and I mean, you know, like technically speaking, you make $1,000 to break even on this film. So I'm not hurting if I'm experimenting at all. I mean, this would be the film to experiment with. This would be the film to sort of decide, like, hey, what would I like to experiment lighting wise? What would I like to experiment with dialogue wise? Because the interesting thing about Rocky Top is it is a more straightforward story, but Rocky Top, I mean, the script is around, you know, 2 hours and 15 minutes long. You know, that's kind of the time that we're working with because I've worked on that script for about 5 to 6 years. I mean, it's been my dream project for a long time. And what Rocky Top does is it, you know, we have a modern day storyline. It's basically a deathbed story. And then we go back in the past from 1979 to 1984. So we're cutting between two timelines. Well, with vignettes, what we're doing is we have that one story, and then
Mm.
we're cutting to different stories because it's basically about a writer who's been turned down from the publishing company, and he's basically doing these little stories, and we get to go in each story. But not only are we going into each story, we're sort of being in his mind. So some of the stuff that I've been playing around with in vignettes is the story will start off black and white, but every single time the artist is inspired, it will actually gradually grow into color as he's inspired. And that's just sort of a neat little experimentation that I'm sort of taking where I don't know if I'm going to do it with Rocky Top, but I get to see what works and what doesn't on that front, you know, sort of balancing two separate
Mm.
stories at the same time.
What was the thing that stood out the most when it came to deciding, oh, this is something that's not what I think it was going to end up being, and so now I'm going to readjust and recalibrate for actually what I truly intend for this, you know, this point of creativity that I've been experimenting with when it came to, you know, adapting it to Rocky Top.
A lot of that stuff happens in the editing room. Most of that stuff is in the editing room because when
It's all
you're on
hindsight
set, I
2020.
mean, yeah, yeah. Well, when you're on set, I mean, I wish that I knew all the problems that I was going to have in the editing room when I was on set. But that's and when you're editing, you're basically saving the film. And I think when you get to the point, and I mean this positively, I do not mean this in a bad way whatsoever. It's just when you get to the point where you can't save the film anymore, where
Mm-hmm.
you've kind of done everything you possibly can. Which it doesn't necessarily mean that whatever it is you're doing doesn't work. It just means you didn't execute it the way that you thought you were going to. And when I get to that point where I get to where, okay, I have messed with this so many times, it doesn't really matter how many more times I mess with it, I'm probably not going to get the result that I'm looking for. Then that's when I kind of go back to the drawing board with that specific technique that I'm trying, and I'm like, all right, I need to utilize my skills in another way to sort of, bring this vision to the screen.
And you're filming Rocky Top in the anamorphic ratio, right?
Uh,
Or one and
we're
two?
actually, well, no. So Rocky Top is a very bold vision for me because we are filming an anamorphic for the modern day scenes, and then
I
for the
see.
flashback scenes, we're going to film in spherical, but we're going to maintain a 2:6:6:1 aspect ratio. So do you know, like when you watch films like the anamorphic aspect ratio is usually anywhere from 2:3:5:1 to 2:4:1, basically, and that's where you got the black bars.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know
Yeah.
if you seen The Hateful Eight from Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, 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 I've seen that.
So you know how the black bars are extremely heavy in that, where it's so wide, and they're filming in that cinema like it's Super 70 Panavision,
Mm-hmm.
where there's some films where the black bars are just almost kind of crazy. Well, Rocky Top is filmed. Think of it like a halfway point between the anamorphic aspect ratio and the Super 70 aspect ratio. It's 2:6:6:1, and the reason why I chose that is in the 50s, whenever they were going through CinemaScope and they started it out, 2:6:6:1 was the original aspect ratio they presented it in. But then things changed. It went to 2:5:5:1. Then it ended up settling to sort of what it is now.
It's
So
like
2:6:6:1.
2.39 or 4 or something like that, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah.
2:39:24, kind of the same thing. To me, it's not, but to most people, they're not even going to recognize it or sort of see the differences. But 2:6:6:1 to me is kind of the lost aspect ratio because there's not really many aspect ratios filmed like that. And I felt like for Rocky Top, metaphorically, that would have been the best way to do it because we're basically, it's a deathbed story. She's basically pulling these memories, from her mind and presenting them to her estranged daughter. And I just felt like that aspect ratio kind of being symbolic to cinema itself, pulling that quote unquote loss aspect ratio and using that. That's what I'm working with. Because nowadays, like back in the past, and what I try to explain to people when it comes to aspect ratios, because like older people, especially people on my side of the fence, like my family and stuff, they'll be like, well, why don't you just take up the whole TV screen? I don't like these
Yeah.
black bars. And why don't you just film it like every other movie? Why don't you
Well, it's
film
about
it
the
like the news?
psychology of where your mind is focusing, though. That's kind of the point of those bars, really.
Exactly, yeah, and they do bring on a mood. And basically, what I try to explain to people that kind of have that outlook, which there's nothing wrong with that because they're the general audience. But I basically explain back in the past, people used aspect ratios because it was requirements because they had to. Now we live in an age where people use aspect ratios for emotions and feelings because we know, like back then, they had to account for, oh, okay, well, this theater screen is scope, or this theater screen is flat, or this theater screen is the original Academy ratio, or our TVs are boxed. Well, now every TV is basically 16:9, or you have like an ultra wide monitor or what
Mm-hmm.
have you. So you can actually experiment with aspect ratios. But back then, it was kind of a riskier thing to do for studios.
Mm-hmm. What was the original? Well, first, tell me the order of events here, because you
Okay.
said that you had been working on the script for Rocky Top for 5 years. Is it? Am I mishearing?
Maybe six.
Maybe
Maybe
6.
six.
Okay, maybe
Mhm.
6. So we'll say 5 and change, just to be
Yeah,
safe.
yeah, yeah. Five and change.
But the short film for that came out, I believe, last year. So
Mhm.
that's telling me that you made the short film to see what kind of attention you might be able to potentially garner for doing the feature, or is there some experimentation that you wanted to try out before you went on to the feature specifically for making Rocky Top the short film, which I'm assuming is probably just an excerpt or a scene from the feature. Tell me about that.
So the short film is essentially its own story. Like the feature film is a mother and daughter, but the short film is a father and son.
Okay.
And I basically use the short film. There gets a time, and I just really appreciate the support of all my collaborators and how much they push me to do things because after Pesadilla, like the timeline of events is I make Pesadilla, and while I'm making Pesadilla, I'm writing Rocky Top. I'd been working on Rocky Top before. I'd had all of these scripts, worked on. I've been working on them still, but I do Pesadilla. After Pesadilla, we do short films. So we do Dancing Man, which was filmed on an iPhone, which
Mm.
I'd always wanted to experiment with, using an iPhone just because I'd never had before, and every other filmmaker had, so I wanted to. And then we did The Interview, which my cinematographer kind of wanted to get into acting a little bit, and and we had the location. I was like, all right, I'm going to write a quick office comedy. And then we did two, which was something that me and an actor from Pasadena, we kind of worked on together a little bit. But then there comes a point where you start coming up with these ideas, but you're still thinking of the ideas that you wrote long ago. You're thinking of the destination, and sometimes you can't get that out of your head. So Rocky Top was deep on my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I was like, I'm going to make a short film for this. And I'm going to sort of see if this whole deathbed confession thing works. Because to set your film primarily in a deathbed confession, I mean, for one, you're taking a big risk because you're relying on these two characters to tell this believable story to an audience, but also the short film is a deathbed confession, not the feature film. But then the feature film, I mean, it's just so dang somber. You know what I mean? Like just hearing these. So no matter what, even if there's happy stories being told in the flashbacks, you still have this really sad, sort of foundation that it's built on. So I really wanted to see what I could do with that. And I'm going to get into some spoilers for my short film. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead. Actually, I watched it in prep for this.
Okay. I'm going to get into spoilers, and I'm sorry for the audience. I'm at the point now to where I'm making the film, and I would rather you have this information than not. But the short film is a deathbed confession where we find out that his father is the serial killer. So the father is basically telling the story of Rocky Top from my script. And then at the very end of it, you find out that his father is the serial killer from the family photos and such. So this is kind of like you've heard it here first thing. Well, in the script for the actual feature film, it's a mother and daughter. And instead of it being a photo album the mother has, it's actually a family photo that we never see until the end of the film. And I don't want to get into any more about that. It's kind of I get some gas at the end of the script when people read it. And that's kind of how you know it works. But no, the short film was basically just me kind of like we were talking about, experimenting and seeing if that actual setup worked. But also when you're doing a short film, I mean, yeah, it would be nice to have somebody on their deathbed tell a story to their son. But honestly, with a short film, you got to have a little bit of punch. And to find out he's the serial killer, I think that's a little bit of a punch,
What inspired the idea for the script?
Bunch of different
Because this
things.
is
like
your
the
big
feature
passion
film
project, it sounds like.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, it actually started off as this kind of epic story that I had written. It actually started out as between 1979 and 1982. It involved the eruption of Mount St. Helens, serial killer, whiskey making, and it was very much inspired by like The Godfather, Lawrence of Arabia. It was a big project, and I used to pitch it to people, and it was a 3-hour long pitch. I had a music playlist, and I would pitch it to people, and it was like a whole thing that I did, and it was fun. I look back at those moments, and they were just really fun. But there becomes a point in your career where you have to be very realistic with yourself. And I looked at Rocky Top, and I saw my script. I saw how thick it was. I'm not getting this made. And if I do get it made, it's going to be a whole career later when people actually trust me. And
how many pages was it?
Oh gosh, the first one that I wrote, it's around like 240. It was a beast. I had 2 intermissions in it.
You had 2 intermissions.
I had two intermissions in it. Yeah.
Oh man, you trying to write the next Gone with the Wind over there, man.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. But no. So But basically, I think as every filmmaker, as they sort of write a script and they let it sit, and then they live life a little bit, and then you go back to that script. And what I did for Rocky Top was I basically. I kind of fell out of love with it for a while because, when you're editing a script that's that long and you're doing drafts, you just get tired of it. You just get exhausted with it. And I kind of fell out of love with it. And the sad reality of it was I enjoyed pitching Rocky Top to people more than I enjoyed writing it. And that's where I realized. I was like, all right, well, with that, I'm going to have to rewrite the whole thing. So I put it away a little bit, and then, not to get into too much personal stuff, but I mean, I will, because I mean, it's kind of what inspired it. After Pasadena, my father, he overdosed, and we're kind of, we're not estranged, but we don't really, talk as much as we probably should. And he overdosed, and he got sent to the hospital, and he was in ICU, and he was, kind of I mean, they didn't know if he was going to make it. And we were kind of just sitting there, and I was looking at him and I was kind of thinking, I was like, you know, if I was on my deathbed and my son, I have a son, if my kids were on my deathbed with them, the last thing that I would probably do is pitch them Rocky Top. That's what I would do with it. And then it hit me. I was like, what if I took the best moments of this script and I switched it around to a deathbed confession? So I take all the fat out of the script and I just take the meat, and I take all my favorite moments, and then I come up with this sub story that I'm already kind of feeling. I'm living it right now, and I combine them together to make the script. And I can tell you this right now, professionally, it is the smartest thing I've ever done in my career.
Mm.
Because when I sent that script out to people, it was the first script that I ever sent to someone where they wanted to sign on and be a producer. The first I sent this script and people actually give me notes. I mean, they'll actually give me notes, and it's not notes on how to improve things. It's notes on how this makes them feel. I actually have a teacher right now that's reading it that I work with, pretty closely, and she's literally just sending me notes of just how it makes her feel. And as a writer, for me, it's basically people are watching this movie before I even make it, and that's why I'm willing to throw all my eggs in the basket to make Rocky Top.
No, I can definitely relate to that because the last year I finished the script for my second feature that I have ever written, and ended up being 170 pages. And so it's like
Yeah.
you have that tendency of like just to pontificate and be as eloquent as possible when it comes to
Mhm.
describing certain things. And I'm looking at we're actually my current screenwriting group is actually just now getting to where we're going to go through it and everything. And the the hard thing about being a writer as a primary function of storytelling, I think maybe you can relate to this, is that uh, a writer is a story, or like I'm maybe you can tell me if this is more you. Maybe I'm misreading a little bit, but maybe this is actually something that you might find some similarities for me personally. I'm a storyteller, but I choose filmmaking as my medium, whereas a lot of filmmakers are just filmmakers, And that's very, that probably comes off way more vain than I'm trying to come off here. But
No.
a lot of filmmakers they love movies, so they make
Yep.
movies. But then there's those writer directors types where they love stories, but they choose filmmaking as the medium for storytelling, and so they become filmmakers, but they're primarily storytellers. Like I could write a book, and be happy, but I
Hmm.
choose filmmaking because that's my favorite way to experience a story.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell me a little bit about why storytelling in the filmmaking medium for you, and maybe even specifically talk a little bit more about how Rocky Top fulfills that for you,
Hmm.
about where the origin point for your creativity and your inspiration comes from.
Yeah, and I didn't know that you were, a screenwriter and a filmmaker. We'll definitely have to like link up after this and talk about that. I would love to read what you wrote and kind of brainstorm and talk. That's awesome. Well, it's actually funny the way you worded that is me to a T. I try to, and this is something that some people will disagree with, and I. I try to be understanding with it, but I sometimes I believe that there's auteurs and there's directors.
Mm.
I sometimes I don't feel like a director, and I think a lot of people get the word auteur very confused with other things, because when I say I'm an auteur, that doesn't mean that I'm some masterful filmmaker guy or anything. What it means is I try to control every aspect of my film because I care about every little detail. Not saying that other directors don't, but that is what an auteur basically is. Is it's you're basically the sole creative force of this vision.
Mm.
And like people like Stanley Kubrick, Andrei Tarkovsky, Quentin Tarantino, David Lynch. David Lynch is probably the quintessential auteur. If we're talking about filmmakers and such. I sometimes I feel more like an auteur than I do a director sometimes. And like what you were saying with I'm a storyteller and filmmaking just so happens to be my medium. That's exactly how I feel. I was listening to an interesting documentary about Stanley Kubrick, and somebody said that Stanley Kubrick was a genius who just so happened to make films. There's geniuses that write books. There's geniuses that, they're generals. There's geniuses that are into politics, food, like making food and stuff like that. and that's kind of like, not in the same vein of him, but like that's kind of what he
Mm-hmm.
did. Is he just so happened to make films,
I hear what you're
but
saying.
he was interested in other things than films. He was interested in mathematics. He was interested in chess. I have a little chessboard back here. He was interested in all types of different things, philosophy. Let me ask you this, since you're kind of in the same boat. As I've gotten deeper into filmmaking, I've gotten deeper into philosophy. Have you found
Oh
yourself
goodness
getting
gracious,
into that?
man. My
Yeah.
on my bedside, it's blurred out, but I got a like I just started reading Crime and Punishment.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're getting in the
Well,
same boat. Yeah.
to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying is that actually, if you look at all the great scientists of old, they were also artists. They were just happened to be known. Like Isaac Newton was also a painter. Galileo was also very into. He was also painting, but he was the marriage the perfect marriage when it comes to, or the perfect type of creativity is not the creativity where you obsess over one aspect of life when it comes to what art form you choose to express it, but it's an innate interest in the subtle nuances of life, and that is not
Mhm.
restricted to a specific art form. That goes into literally everything else. And so creatives, the purest creatives, I think, are the ones who and this probably lends to why some creatives end up being a little more scatterbrained and they can't finish projects because they're too obsessive about everything. Is that
Mhm.
a true creative sees the beauty in absolutely everything, and so the art form is simply the way to capture it. That's ultimately, I think that's where creativity comes from. Is not just the willingness to experiment, which is kind of why the scientists of old, like Isaac Newton and Galileo, and
Mhm.
Roger Bacon, they ended up having they had their art projects on the side because they didn't just had a need to investigate; they had a need to they needed a medium and an art form to be able to express it to others who couldn't quite necessarily understand exactly what they were seeing,
Mhm.
with everything else. And so art is really just pointing out the beauty that you see that you wouldn't necessarily be able to communicate otherwise.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. And I didn't know that about Einstein. I didn't know that he was also a painter.
Isaac
I'm
Newton.
trying to, or not, or Isaac Newton. My bad. Well, then, yeah. So I was completely off there. I'm trying to think. There was another. When I watched Eyes Wide Shut, are you familiar with Sidney Pollock?
I'm not, unfortunately.
He was an actor in Eyes Wide Shut, and when I was watching Eyes Wide Shut, I was like, this is a really good actor. Like I mean, he was fantastic. So I started looking at it because I wanted to watch more of his films. Turned out he was a director, and like it's kind of funny. You do have some people within this medium. I mean, it can extend to other stuff. Like you could be a songwriter and also want to paint. You could be a politician and also want to, maybe play sports. But when it comes to filmmaking, the thing about filmmaking is there's so many different roles
Mm-hmm.
when making a film. Like you have the writer, director, the editor, the cinematographer, the person doing the score. You have gaffing. I
The
mean,
art production,
honestly,
everything.
yeah, I mean, depending on your budget, the possibilities are really endless. I mean, you could even make up roles on set. At some points, I mean, I wouldn't put it past anybody. But the thing about filmmaking, like you were saying, people get so obsessed with different details, and it's why they sort of can't finish a project sometimes, which I have found myself definitely in that boat. Is for me, the thing that really gravitates me towards the whole medium of filmmaking is these scripts that I've written beforehand. The beautiful thing about before I actually go and film, because when I put my projects out, I'm not rushing them out whatsoever, because before I get done or before I actually start filming, I write the script. Then I get to sort of put together my shot list. I get to choose my locations. I get to choose what equipment that I want to use. I get to sort of set up my editing timeline and kind of figure out how I'm going to edit this thing and get all my folders together. So there's basically this whole pre-production process that I get to do before I actually start filming. So what I like to sort of consider it as is pre-production is figuring out what colors I want to work with, and I'm mixing my paint. And then the filming is actually, painting, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the quickest part for me. And then the editing, I'm kind of putting a little fan there and drying the paint. Editing and pre-production are my longest. I mean, I edited a film for almost a year. Like Pesadilla was almost a year of editing.
Mm-hmm. What were the lessons you learned from making Pesadilla that you were careful not to repeat when you're making. Where are you at in the process of making Rocky Top? Curiously, the feature.
We're in pre-production right now. We
Oh,
have the
preacher.
script. We've done casting. We're not completely casted yet. We're actually still looking for funding. We've actually got some funding, but we're still trying to get the budget as big as we possibly can.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's a pretty ambitious story. It's there's a lot of different moving pieces. How I'm filming vignettes right now, I could not film Rocky Top the way I'm doing vignettes right now. There's no way.
Okay.
So we're still
why is
getting
that?
things together. Well, because vignettes, basically, there's hardly any budget, and also the script has kind of changed. As I've went on this production, I mean, the script has changed. Like we filmed vignettes for about 7 months, but it's been a total of 9 filming days because we've had to wait for the seasons to change, and we're reusing some characters for them to look different. Honestly, if I could go back in time before I filmed vignettes, I would be scared. That's where I'm at right now. But I'm on the.
It's like that way with every project, though. You know.
Well, yeah.
You're like, I cannot believe I just put myself through that. You know what I'm going to do? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it again. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it again.
That's exactly what it is. Well, today is actually my final filming day for vignettes. It's my final filming day.
Nice.
And I'm embracing it because even though my cinematographer, he'll be coming later, but he got sick. He's been sick. He just got back from Canada. He has a stomach bug. And then my practical effects guy, he's on vacation right now. The person that does behind the scenes, she's actually at work. And, so everybody's just been busy. And this was the only weekend that I could, actually film. We have the location and stuff. Yesterday was actually my birthday, so we were filming then. So I didn't celebrate that.
Mine's actually next week.
Oh, okay.
We're both
sweet.
May.
So you're a May baby. You're a May baby.
Yeah.
So you're cool.
We're cool.
But back with Pesadilla. So, Pesadilla, when it came to filming Pesadilla, it wasn't only a learning experience for filmmaking, it was a learning experience for learning people as well. It was a learning experience just all across the board. And the reason why I know it's a learning experience is because we filmed Pesadilla for $20,000 and I'm filming vignettes for $1,000. And objectively, vignettes looks like a better film than Pesadilla. It feels like a better film than Pesadilla.
Was it because you have equipment left over from making Pesadilla, so you have a little bit of leverage right there? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I have all the equipment that I had for Pesadilla, but also, I offer to pay people. I never do a project and make anybody work for free. The first thing I'll say is hey, how much do you want to get paid? Because I'm pulling from my own money, or I'm pulling from Smoky Dog, which is the company that I run. And thankfully, I have people that's I don't want paid. I just want to put it back in the project. And to find people like that is a very beautiful thing because they're taking their time and their energy, and also they just want to do something that's very unique. Like when it comes to the films that I make, not putting them on a pedestal or anything, not at all. But I was telling you, I like to experiment, and sometimes actors really like to do that too. Sometimes their experience on set is payment enough. Sometimes getting something interesting for their reel is that's payment enough. But no, I mean, Pesadilla, as I went through that whole process, I just saw everything. I was like, oh, I wish I would have done this different. I wish I would have done that different, to the point to where I'm actually doing another version of Pesadilla. I actually have the original timeline, and I'm going through and I'm doing a different color grade. I'm going through the audio again. So when we're done with distribution that we have through Bayview, when that's over with, I will have a new version of Pesadilla to put out to the world. I'm basically doing a whole different quote unquote transfer. This is Pesadilla remastered. You know how video games come out and they're like, oh, we have a remastered?
Yeah.
This is Pesadilla remastered. And the reason why I'm doing it is because I discovered who I was as a filmmaker right around last year when I started doing these shorts. And what I mean by that is, I know that's very vague, but I discovered what I like when it comes to lighting. It might be something very simple, but when it comes to lighting, I like to utilize natural light as much as I possibly can because that gets me the look that not only I'm looking for in other films, but also my own work. But then I also know how I like to mess with practical light. So I've kind of ended up getting this little flair that I don't want to say it because I'd like people to pick up on it as I keep making films. Like, oh, I've noticed he's done that in every film that he's made. But I want to try to go through Pesadilla and, for better or worse, kind of change things about it, to kind of fit the style that I'm currently working in.
Okay. What is it in terms of your technical creativity when it comes to accomplishing a scene? Would you say that the lighting is the thing that you pay attention to the most?
Um,
What sticks out like
well,
a sore
believe
thumb when you're trying to create a scene, and you're trying to problem solve for how you want to creatively go about accomplishing a particular task that you notice the most?
it's a framing thing. Honestly, framing is one of the big things that I pay attention to because even in conversation, I mean, even in filmmaking groups, like how like some films you'll see some films that are made for like a couple of thousand. Like you look at Christopher Nolan's The Following or David Lynch's Eraserhead; those are basically bare bone budgets. I mean, they're stripped
Mm-hmm.
down completely. But then you'll see some films that come out for like they'll have a $500,000 budget and they'll kind of have that soap opera look. You know what I'm talking about? That
Mm-hmm.
it'll kind of
Mm-hmm.
have that look, and that's something that I just refuse to have on my films. I feel like framing is the main thing. And I know lighting. I've actually gotten to arguments with other filmmakers about this. It's fun, like it's
Oh yeah.
it's good to have a nice, intense conversation. God forbid filmmakers get in arguments, right? Um, but no, like God forbid the theater actress gets dramatic. You know what I mean? It's
Facts.
but no, like when it comes to lighting, one thing that I have realized, I didn't go to film school. I went to college, but I didn't go to film school. I
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of when it comes to shooting stuff, when I use natural light, it seems like people that are kind of in film school give me the most, pushback when it comes to that using natural light. But then when I actually talk to people that work in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
they actually agree that natural light is the way to go a lot of the times because, for one, you can control it better than you can practicals. And what I mean by that is
It's also
practical
free.
lights. Yeah, well, yeah, but also practical lights. Yeah, you can control it any which way you want. But the moment your lighting is bad, that screws up everything. Color grading, the editing. My philosophy is, I was actually told from somebody that he had worked on bigger sets, out in LA and Atlanta and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The way that he did things, he was a gaffer. He said, if you do not have $1 million to mess with lights, don't mess with them, because what you're going to do is you're going to end up giving your film this kind of, you know, very sterile. Like if you don't have time to mess with lighting, it just, you're not able to sort of achieve the certain look, because the ultimate lighting setup is to make lighting look natural but look emphasized. That's what I think,
Right.
because unless you're
Mm-hmm.
going for an actual stylistic look, but for me, I try to use natural light, and I only use practical lights if I have to. So if it's too dark or something like that, then I'll like, all right, let's emulate this street lamp or do something like that. But most film productions, especially ones that I've seen or behind the scenes or what have you, natural light is a big, I mean, it's a big thing on film sets because it saves time, it saves money, but also we don't live in a world where, lighting was a requirement because film stock and the way people would shoot. Now that we use digital, we can change ISO on the fly, we can change our white balance, we can do a bunch of different things. So I find that having depth in the frame and the framing is sort of the base of my scene. If it doesn't look pretty, then I'm not filming it. I will literally sit there until I have it framed exactly the right way. Because sure, you can light the scene however you want. I mean, you can put as many props as you want in the frame. If you don't have that depth, if you don't have that nice sort of visual, um, input for your audience, then it's
Mm-hmm.
just not going to be interesting. At least to me, that's how I work. But I know we're talking about like the visuals, but in reality, sound is like the big thing too.
Oh yeah.
Which I mean, I don't do sound often, but I mean, I put a lot of trust in the people that do sound, and sometimes it when you're working indie, it's your sound is either going to work sometimes or it's not, and that's just something you got to be really cautious about on set. But that's one of those things that's a given. You want clean audio, you want to make sure that it sounds good, but when it comes to the visuals, there's so many different steps you can take to get the scene the way you want it before you actually start shooting it.
I actually kind of have a little bit of a theory about when it comes to the image quality, because of the way cameras are nowadays, and you can when you're a lot of the films that are in theaters right now, they're shot on 4K and whatnot, and sometimes 8K, but then they downgrade the resolution to be able to make it work.
Sometimes
But
16K.
yeah, I forgot that was a thing too. Like I
Yeah.
actually kind of think, and maybe this is just me, but it's actually there's sometimes if you're looking at an image when it comes to watching cinema, is that if the image looks too clean and has too much detail, your mind is unconsciously distracted from the story because it has so much data and information that it's picking up, and every little thing is standing out, that it if it looks too clean and too high resolution and too perfect, it actually kind of takes the audience out of the moment, but they don't necessarily recognize it because they're trying to pick up on the story. But when there's so much happening, when it's going through your eyes into the part of the brain that processes everything visually, that there's an unconscious layer that actually happens when the audience is watching, and they're kind of taken out. They're not as absorbed into the movie as they would be if it looked a little bit more natural, because now we have so much playroom with technology to be able to make it exactly how we want, that the tendency for filmmakers is to make it too pretty, I think. When you go back and like watch movies from the 80s and the 90s, they have that look because they could only get it so perfect, you know what I mean? But now that we got these cameras that are just basically freaking miracles at this point, that we're kind of living in an age where everything looks way too clean, especially like in indie films where they really want to push image quality.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to that, because and it's like the argument with filming with digital and film. That's some of the reasons why people like filming with film, is because digital is too clean. But this is one thing that I wholeheartedly believe in. It is not hard to get a good looking image. It's not hard to set up your camera, adjust the lighting and have everything look really pretty, get all the colors right, and then you can go in, do a really stylistic color grade, work with like 500 nodes and make it look beautiful. But in reality, if you go to the theater and you watch a film, like you see a film from a studio or what have you, like you'll see a lot of short films where they'll do a lot of crazy camera movements and stuff, and do like a lot of experimental edits and everything. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But when you go to the theater, most Hollywood films are very stripped down, bare bones. I mean, a lot of the times when you watch them, they're pretty, but they do what they set out to do. They'll have their coverage. They'll have two characters talking, or they'll have like their action sequences or whatever. I like to think of The Brutalist from Brady Corbett. Did you watch The Brutalist?
Oh, it's on my list. I heard it looked like a great film though.
Well, The Brutalist, I mean, the way that most of the time the camera was either locked or it was handheld. They weren't using any like gimbals. They weren't using any cranes. They weren't using anything. Just like when you watch, for instance, Anora, Sean Baker's Anora, a lot of that film looks like it's handheld, and they're not doing anything except for that cool helicopter shot that they had coming up. Like, that's one thing that I've noticed. Yeah, people try to get, I think, too stylistic to the point to where it sets an expectation, in a sense, like because there'll be some filmmakers will be like, they'll see somebody's film and they'll like, man, you could have colored that better, or you could have gotten more coverage. But in reality, I think if your story's good enough, people really don't care. I mean, I'm serious. Like, The Brutalist is 3.5 hours long, and actually the second time that I watched it, I timed it. There is a dialogue sequence that is literally just two people. They don't even cut really hardly any coverage. It's just two people going back and forth, and then Brady Corbett just went around the room and filmed random B-roll. That's all he needed to make that that scene stand out. I think if you have a plan in place, I think you have a better chance of your scene standing out than you just filming a bunch of different stuff. Boom, 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 boom. All this looks pretty. Let's film that. Go in the editing room, and then you have too much stuff. I think having a plan is kind of the way to go. Like what you were saying about things looking too pretty, and everything kind of like being too crystal clear. Well, actually, one of the things that I try to do on purpose whenever I film is if I can get a window, or if I can get a light, like I'm at this light we actually filmed in. I'm filming in the office complex that we filmed in today. I actually purposely had the light behind my subject's head, kind of silhouetting him a little bit. So that way when he moved, the light kind of glared on the camera. So that way when I go into post, I'll just do like a little simple node structure. I won't do anything too crazy. And then I'll sort of emphasize my colors, kind of get that look that I like working with, boost the bloom up, add a little bit of grain. And what that does is it adds enough dirtiness to the frame to where it's still a very clean image. It looks really clean, but it gives that dreamlike element to it. Have you seen The Zone of Interest?
I have not, but also tell me that you work in DaVinci without telling me you work in DaVinci.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's yeah.
As
I
soon as
do.
you
I
said
do.
node based, I'm like, because that's what I'm using to color the, or actually, put together this short I've been working on. So I'm like, I know what he's
Okay.
talking about.
Yeah, yeah, no, and DaVinci Resolve, I really love it. I used to use Premiere, and again, there's nothing wrong with using Premiere. There's one thing: any filmmakers that are watching this, look, I might seem very opinionated with what I'm talking about, but you're opinionated too. We're all opinionated as filmmakers.
Yeah,
So
just
just because
embrace
I
it.
say DaVinci, yeah, yeah, just embrace it. Yeah, just embrace it. But no, DaVinci Resolve is the best editing software. It's better than Premiere. Oops, no, I'm just kidding. But I've realized DaVinci Resolve. No, there's nothing wrong with Premiere. I actually do think Premiere is a lot easier to use at times, and sometimes I envy Premiere users while I'm using DaVinci at times when I'm cutting. But it's really nice to not have to transfer my timeline from Premiere to DaVinci to do the coloring and then back to Premiere.
Yeah, that is true. It's also, well, I
And then
mean,
there's people that use Avid and they're laughing at us right now. So
I know, but Avid is for that's a different ballpark right
yeah,
there. What's the most important skill that you've had to pick up in order to be able to competently direct?
speaking, anxiety. I'm serious.
Communicating?
Communicating, yeah. I make a joke about Pesadilla that Pesadilla put me on antidepressants because I actually did start them during pre-production. I'm such a tortured artist, man. No,
Oh, I know. You just
but
start sipping bourbon in the middle of the interview. You're like, I can't fucking do this
yeah, I
anymore.
know. Yeah. No, no, it is social skills because I feel like, and there will be David F. Sands. I don't know how to say his last name, but he was actually talking about being an introverted director.
Mm-hmm.
That you can be an introverted director, and I do think you can. It's very hard this day and age. For me, my personality is I want to be somebody that kind of like lives in the shadows, kind of works under the scenes,
The
or
puppet
behind the
master.
scenes. Yeah, yeah. I like to be a puppet master. This reality, you really can't be that this day and age. I know it's cool, but you really can't. Maybe when your filmmaking career gets started and you have people to give you money,
Not in the day and age of
you could.
content creation. Certainly not.
No,
No, you can't.
absolutely not. And I learned that the hard way. I'm constantly on social media doing things. I don't necessarily like it, but I have to do it. And also being very straightforward. You have to be straightforward in your vision. Like when it comes to film financing, like with Rocky Top, I've talked to some, like with Pesadilla, it was, friends and family that gave us money and we did a crowdfunder,
Mm-hmm.
those were our main financiers. But for Rocky Top, I'm talking to some pretty heavy hitting people and some people that have a lot of money, and they do not want somebody that's scared. They do not want somebody that does not have a vision. They want somebody that's going to be front and center, tell you exactly how it is because they're business people, because that's how they got started. And they
Mm-hmm.
know that somebody with, a very strong vision, they're going to be the ones that actually bring it to life. And I won't name drop anybody or anything like that, but I've been working with somebody and we went out to eat. We went out to lunch with each other. It took me 2 meetings. Our second meeting, he wrote me a check for Rocky Top.
Mm.
And he said it was just because he had faith in it. He read
Is
the
this somebody
script.
that's produced or at least financed film before, or is it somebody like? There's a lot of different ways to raise money.
I think he's financed film before, but I've done a little bit of work for him, and
I see.
and we've I've kind of been very transparent about my vision for Rocky Top, and and it's just I think transparency is first and foremost. You have to be prepared to go into a meeting with a bunch of people and know that they're laughing at you in their head, because some people will say, "Oh, a cute little movie." Because when you're reaching out for film financing, you can't just talk to film financiers. You're going to be talking to financiers across the board, and some people, they're not going to care about your vision. They're not going to care about the film, but
It's an
you have to
investment.
be.
They want to see if
It's
they
an
can recoup their money.
Exactly. And filmmaking is the most dangerous investment ever because you don't know if you're going to make your money back. But one thing that I do tell investors, look, this is going to be an investment that is going to be hard. We might not make our money back right off the bat, but this is going to be the most fun you've ever had investing your money. You've got to be prepared to say that to people, and you've got to be able to handle rejection.
Mm.
That's the big thing.
Yeah.
Can I be honest with you?
No, just I prefer you lie to me.
No, I like that. That was actually a good one. No, when it comes to directing, I'm going to be completely honest. Directing is easy. If you've got a good team, it's easy.
That's
I
kind of
mean,
the dirty
if you've got
secret, dude. Once you realize what
exactly, if you
directing is, that's the dirty secret. That's like
yeah,
the
yeah. If you've got a good cinematographer, if you've got somebody with audio, if your talent, 90% of directing is casting. It is. I have realized that because everybody that I cast, I almost go out of my way now to send theater, performers, people that do theater scripts, because theater performers that are really good at doing their dialogue and such, they're really good at remembering their lines. In
oh
theater,
yeah.
they're really good at memorizing their lines, and and most of it is that. So directing is actually extremely easy. It's all the steps that come before it.
hmm Well,
Directing is the
there's
easy
another
part.
there's a local filmmaker. His name's Joseph Cox. Which I've had him on the podcast. He's a very interesting person to interview because he's done a lot of short films and he's also trying to work on his next feature. And get that thing
Yeah.
ball rolling out of the park, or whatever the saying is. Yeah, what surprises me as like being a writer is how often I am at loss for the perfect word, and I'm like filtering through 15 different options, and I'm just like, I don't like
Yeah.
that one. None of those actually
Yeah.
fit, and it sounds like I'm stuttering, but it's like no, I'm filing through everything that I'm thinking
Hmm.
about. Um, but no, what he told me about directing was just like it's one of those things. Is like, oh yeah, of course that's how it is. But the
Hmm.
key to good directing after casting is just to be able to describe the subtext to the actor. What's
Yeah.
the subtext of this actual piece of dialogue? And then once it's so simple, but when you put it like that, it's like, oh shoot, that's literally it. And then even if you aren't necessarily the most technically apt person in terms of being a director, and how you communicate with your heads of department, that's secondary. Because if you hire
Hmm.
some good people, all you have to be able to do is describe how this scene particularly makes you feel, and a
Yeah.
little bit about what your vision is, and a good person will make it look like you know more than you actually do. And that's kind of
Yeah.
the secret of being a director. Is like, it's like, you get on stage after the project, if you're doing your premiere or whatever, and then you're pontificating about like all these things, and then but in the back of your mind, you're like, that guy in that one scene, he really saved my ass that one time because I didn't know how to necessarily approach that.
Well, the director is definitely it's the main vision, because having, multiple visions, I mean, that can get cluttered, that can get out of hand sometimes, and having that one singular vision, I think, is very important. But yeah, like what you were saying about like directing, like I did a 48-hour film challenge, and we had gaffers, we had cinematographers, we had I had an editor. I had an on-site editor editing the film for us, because it's a 48-hour film challenge. And
Yeah.
I had PAs. I had everything, and I was just sitting there, and I was trying to like, I don't like this. You know what I mean? Like today, I'm working with the smallest crew I kind of ever had. It's a skeleton crew, and I'm kind of embracing it a little bit because I get to be hands on. I get to be more hands on with things, and
hmm
that's kind of like, I don't know, like for directing for me, like there's some people that like to work with those big crews, so that way all they have to, they can sit in Video Village and stuff, and sometimes that's how people they work better that way. But for me, I like to have maybe 5 or 6 strong people on set, each with their own role, and be able to get intimate with them
hmm
on a professional level, and be able to, because I feel like intimacy can matter a lot when it comes to telling a story. And I'm just somebody that likes to work with smaller crews. It's like Paul Thomas Anderson when he went and saw this film set for Eyes Wide Shut. Kubrick would only work with like a few people on set, and PTA was like, "Why do you work with so little people?" And Kubrick was like, "Well, how many more do you need?"
I mean,
You
he
know?
ain't wrong.
No, no, he's not. I mean, this morning I did sound, cinematography, lighting. I mean, grip. I did everything this morning, and I mean, it was tough, but we got it
hmm
done, and it's all you can really hope for.
hmm Oh, tell me a little, because you also have a YouTube channel. I noticed,
Yes.
and then you're fairly frequent about uploading. It seems like. So, what role do you think that plays into your creativity, and how do you think that having that little bit of an outlet to be creative affects your your ability to do bigger and larger, more technically demanding things like going into Rocky Top?
So YouTube I usually use for marketing purposes most of the time. It's just kind of a way to get my face out there
Mm-hmm.
and get to connect with other cinephiles and such. And so there's that, but also it's a platform for me to put my work on. But also, odds are if somebody's interested in my YouTube videos, they're probably going to be interested in my filmmaking journey. So I usually just use YouTube as kind of a marketing thing. But also, the interesting thing about YouTube, I've recently become a partner on there, and you, YouTube, if you're the thing about YouTube is if you're doing something on YouTube, you really have to stick to a certain niche. And the reason being is because, like, for me, I'll do anything. I'll do a movie discussion because I don't consider myself a critic whatsoever. But I'll do movie discussions. Maybe I'll talk about a newer film. I'll talk about an older film. Maybe I'll talk about a video game. But the thing about it is if you start venturing outside of your niche, like for instance, if I watch a film the day it comes out, which I try to, and then I do a discussion, I get a lot of views on my videos. Like
Mm-hmm.
not a lot, but I get more than I'm typically used to. But then if I talk about, some Russian film that came out in the 50s, made for a shoestring and a, peppermint, I might get like 12 views on that.
Right.
And I think, yeah, and sometimes it can be discouraging, but for me, I have to remember, like, okay, not everybody cares about Tarkovsky. And, but I'll make a video about it anyway, because what that does is it allows me to connect. So who cares if I get 12 views on one of my YouTube videos talking about Tarkovsky and then I get 4,000 views on Long Legs? Well, I've just connected with 12 other people that like Tarkovsky, and maybe they'll comment on my video or maybe they'll reach out on Instagram. I think a lot of people get it twisted where, oh, haha, you only got 10 views. No, I have 10 other people that saw my stuff, and you never know who that one viewer is going to be.
Because it's also a networking tool, which I found
Yeah.
actually when I started this podcast. Because it's not, although filmmaking is my main interest, I also like expand this to like I want to interview comedians and musicians and
You're
that
good
sort of
at it.
thing. Oh, thank you, appreciate it. But the finding the nuance in the art form reveals a lot about the artist, and it reveals their psychology, and it reveals how they think, and once you keep digging deeper, you find out the why, and the why is where everything comes from. When it comes to what a person does, how a person goes about doing it, and so it's a very it is fulfilling. But when it comes to like other making other forms of media other than the main one that you're interested in, it's also a great networking tool.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because I've met a lot of people I would never have met if I didn't have this podcast, and so
Mhm.
a little bit of context is that like I did like I made a feature like God is it really that long ago? Yeah, like 7 years ago, and which probably isn't going to get finished because it had way too much CGI. It was a long story, but it was very very ambitious, and so that's actually what I'm cutting down to a short film right now,
Oh, okay.
partially, yeah. But after that, I became a little bit of a recluse because like I don't want to be the artist that hops from project to project, doing multiple things. And like I'm very much like,
Yeah.
okay, I set out to do this, I'm going to do it, I'm going to finish it before anything gets done. But it kind of hurt me in that way because like that's a chunk of life. That is a chunk of
Yeah.
life. But I was writing during this entire time, so like I became much more of a writer. But in the past like 2 years, I've been putting myself out there, and this podcast is actually one of those ways to actually connect with people. And the other thing I've learned from starting this is that like people are just doing their best, and that's
Yeah.
honestly all. That's all you can do, And at the end of the day, as long as you can put your head down on your pillow and know that you tried your best with the information and the decisions that you had, then even if it doesn't work out, you can still sleep at night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then and venturing out into different things, like you were saying. I mean, athletes, for instance, they don't meet. A lot of people just playing basketball or football or baseball or anything. They go to charity events.
Mm-hmm.
They'll host certain things, and it's kind of like, yeah, you can have your main thing that you do, but also this day and age, it's always good to have something else that you can also do to reach out to people. You know, but otherwise, I would be, trying to reach out to people who like, Ingmar Bergman or something. And I can tell you right now, I'm just going to be sitting in a room with like 15 people for a little bit, And but no, and that's about your short film. I don't mean to like flip the roles or anything, but I want to know like how does that feel as an artist to make a feature film and then cut it down to a short, because usually it's the opposite. You make a short film and it
Mm-hmm.
goes into a feature. How does that how does that make you feel? Like I'm just so curious, man, because I kind of feel for you, dude. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
is it rough? Are you excited about it? Like I don't know,
Well,
man. Like
it's more like a. It's more like a. It's a. It kind of feels like a loved one that has been on life support for a while, and you're hoping that they're gonna get cured, and then eventually, yeah, it's just time to pull the plug, you know.
mm,
So it's like I kind of knew. Well, the longer it went on, the more I realized how unlikely it would end up, being able to get finished. So it's not like a shock to me.
hmm
Um, but I would suppose once the short film was out, and then I'll put it in some local festivals and see what kind of happened. It's like it can always get resurrected because everything's still there, you know.
hmm
But well, I'm kind of making the short film. It's like, okay, maybe there's a couple local producers I'd like to see because it's like almost entirely done. It's just there's some work for this 10-minute climax which has a lot of visual effects with it.
yeah,
And the main guy who was working on it couldn't necessarily continue spending his free time because he had some other things in life that he
mm,
needed to work on. Like he lost a chunk of his income because the one client he was relying on wasn't, so like he lost the
mm,
leverage to be able to continue to working on the project in the way that he was able to do it, which is understandable but unfortunate. But I would suppose, to put it poetically, once the short film is out, I anticipate it would feel something like a ghost attending its own funeral, you know?
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's yeah. Well, I was actually gonna. I was actually going to say something way more vulgar, like as an example, with like you're talking about
You had a
it's like
joke and I
pulling the
ruined
plug.
it.
Well, no. Like you actually yours sounded a lot more sophisticated than what I was going to say, because you were like it's like pulling the plug on a loved one, and it's like a ghost going to its own funeral. I was going to say it's like pulling a plug on a loved one and then just being able to eat them. At least I got food, like. But no, well, look, I mean, look, if you ever need any help with anything, please reach out. I'm it's good to meet other filmmakers and such, and
Yeah.
it seems like you're on a very interesting journey as well, and
It is not the one I
I
planned
wish you.
on. I promise you, it is
No,
not the
and
one I
most of the
planned
time
on.
it's not. And I think a lot of people would be like, oh, did you just compare your project to the death of a loved one or something? And in reality, yes, we spend so much time working on these. Like when I made Pesadilla, my wife, she was pregnant. I had a kid. Moved into a house, and so many different things happened in that time period. And like while I was writing it, I got married, and people just don't realize like how long you spend on these things and how much time and energy they take life out of you. I think the good experiences can put life into you, and I think the bad ones can genuinely take life out of you. I
Mm-hmm.
think that it might sound dramatic, but it's true.
Well, I want to close with give me the Rocky Top pitch. What would you tell an investor right now as to why they should invest, or at least be interested in investing, even if, because it is risky.
Rocky Top. Oh my gosh, dude, put me on the spot here, and I'm not allowed to look at my notes.
Let's go.
But
Let's
what
go.
I
Come
have
on.
written down. Oh no, Rocky Top is essentially. I'll just be bold with it. I'll say exactly what me and one of my actors talked about it. Rocky Top is the film everybody wants to see. It's the deathbed the deathbed story, the flashbacks. It has every single element of a film that you would want in it, but it's also going to challenge you at the same time. It's almost like, in a sense, are you hungry? Okay, well then I'm going to give you food. Oh, you know what I mean? Throughout the whole entire runtime. Because the film itself, dude, that was horrible. What I just said, they'd probably just walk out of the room right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I don't know. It's a
Why is
family
Rocky Top
story.
meaningful to you?
Let's see, because it's a family story that takes everything away and then gives it back again. And when you get it back again, it's not what you had before.
So it's a it's a journey where you get broken and then and then you heal by the end of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like getting over a heartbreak, you know.
Yeah. Can I tell you? I'll tell you what I've actually been telling investors. It's like, okay, do you like American Beauty?
Yeah,
Do
give me
you
the
like
lies. I
Ordinary
want to hear. I
People?
want to hear the sweet sounding lies.
No, yeah, well, no. I mean, like, it's like, do you like Ordinary People? Do you like do you like American Beauty? Okay, well, imagine you were to take American Beauty and Silence of the Lambs and Forrest Gump and just clash them together. Sold.
Boom. Yeah, it's like you kind of feel like you bastardize, your child when you start to like compare other movies and it's like, mashing genres or whatever, and says you just feel like you're slutting, like kind of like you're prostituting, your own child when you're doing that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's kind of, it is helpful. It's like it's one of those skill
It
sets I think
is. It's
that
necessary.
filmmakers just need to like. They just got to get over it, learn how to do it. It's the way it works, and then because ultimately it's whether did you get the money or not.
Yeah.
And you got to be a little bit pragmatic when it comes to your art form that way. Like save the real intimate things about the art for the things that don't involve the business aspect of it.
Yeah.
Kind of like the separation of church and state. The separation between art and business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dylan, it's been great getting to know you.
Absolutely.
You got to thank Tamara for me, for recommending you, because this wouldn't have happened without her. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience?
When I mean, kind of like I think this was a really good conversation we had. I mean, really for any filmmaker, it's just when things get tough, embrace them, and just I know it sounds corny, but seriously, don't give up. I mean, like I know it's corny, but that's like the advice. Don't give up. What are you going to do? Give up. What are you going to do when you give up? What are you going to do after that?
You're going to be bored.
About
you're just going to go right
yeah,
back to it.
Exactly.
So don't waste time.
Exactly.
Just don't
give
give
let
up.
the flame ever burn out. Don't let the flame ever burn out.
Well, Dylan, thanks again. It was great getting to know you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Same to you.